Hello, estimates. My name is Ronnie Castillo. I am a financial and strategic consultant, and I work in impact investment, so I'm very related to the topic. And I'm here sharing with a couple of very interesting people, and we're trying to structure something interesting to you, so I'm gonna let them to introduce themselves. Hendrik?
Hey, everyone. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hope y'all are doing all right today. Thanks for being here. My name is Hendrith. I'm the managing partner of Mayflower Plymouth Capital. We focus on municipal and corporate bonds, but we also do advisory work helping companies regarding their strategies. And obviously, sustainability is a hot topic, so that's one thing that we touch on as well. So really happy to be here and have this discussion.
Hello.
Serge.
Hey. Hi, everybody. My name is Sergey, and I'm a CEO and co-founder of QCharge. Our company is basically key turn solution for the charging stations, for electrification of the properties, businesses, for in a certain way to support the sustainability and to reduce the carbon emission and the footprint that we have today. And exactly this is the reason why we're here to talk about the greenwashing, how actually that can be achieved in a certain way. Long-term, short-term. Long-term, we are pretty far away from achieving that stuff. But on the short-term, we do have today, as we would say, like an off-shelf solution that we can actually implement to create better sustainability and our environmental awareness for the consumers and just for our health and life and the planet.
Thank you. Let's set the stage with some definitions here. Henry, how would you define the true corporate sustainability, and how does it differ from superficial or greenwashing practices?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ronnie. So, corporate sustainability is really about, the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the next generation's ability to do exactly that. And I think waste is a critical component there. When we introduce waste into that equation, we end up with a situation where we are compromising the next generation's ability to do that. And that's a problem that will show up at some point or another. And then greenwashing is really about companies trying to tell the story that they are sustainable without actually being sustainable. And sometimes that may be a matter of deception, and other times it may be simply that they aren't qualitatively meeting that standard.
Excellent. I'm gonna talk to you about a little bit the current landscape, and then we can go to the innovator there. What are some of the most pressing challenges companies face when they are implementing authentic sustainability initiatives? I think that we don't have to confuse sustainability with non-profits. I think that I run a non-profit in my country, and I am very aware that non-profits eat most of the donations in administrative costs, and very little goes to the projects. So I think we don't have to confuse one with another. I think that the implementation of the sustainability initiatives are sustainable only if we take into an account the financial aspect of the implementation. That means that this don't has to be seen with the CFO or the board members of the company as a gift. It has to be seen as an investment and has to be measured with a return on investment economically, So that way it's gonna be sustained in the overall process, and it's gonna have the attention of the directors and shareholders. Otherwise, it's just giving money, and probably with poor results. Okay, let's talk about innovation. Why innovation is critical for moving beyond greenwashing and achieving minimum sustainability goals?
Well, that's a good question. the innovation, I mean, generally, the entire humanity, it's moving all the time through the innovation, right? We started first with horses and carriages. It took us about, how many hundreds of years that we transitioned from horses to the vehicles. Then after the innovation from the vehicles, right, just to achieve the flying, it happened in 20 years. So our track of innovation, for example, it's shortened. So everything is right now on a faster pace, specifically with all the technology and adoption advancements. We heard all these days, yesterday and today, talking about the AI and how that can be adoptive. But the true innovations, to create actually the companies to become sustainable and call themselves actually sustainable, it needs to come with large innovations, how that we can actually remove ourselves from the today's regular, let's say, heavy pollutants of a creation of the energy that we can actually use. So, just simply way of better ways to kind of create some type of different ways of collecting, in a better way to collect actually solar energy, storing of that energy in a different ways, in different means, so that we can actually use it and deploy it when it's actually on a higher demand, and to call it and to actually be completely sustainable. And the way how we can actually be that is going to lead us with the new novelties into this and breakthroughs through all these achievements that we are right now actually seeing. However, as I mentioned, right, for the short, that basically it can be done as a short term. On a long term, if we look, for example, the way how the innovation has to move forward, it's actually to find different ways how we can actually come to, let's say, the natural resources and the raw materials in a different ways and different means than we're doing that today. Because majority of the heavy equipment that we are still using, it's on a diesel engines and a gasoline engines, so they're heavy pollutants, so they have very high carbon footprints today. And then again, logistics. One of the largest actually pollutants today are actually the ships, because they burn so much of tons and tons of diesel. You do not see that because it's far away, it's not in the city. The consumers, let's say the population, we can see in the cities through the smog, which we're going to say, okay, we have too much of a smog, it's pollutant. So we're trying to reduce that through certain initiatives and environmental mandates and policies. However, we are way more pollutant, let's say, through the airplanes. All the logistics that goes around, it's like one of the heaviest pollutants. So I believe so that innovation has to start happening more towards that, and we can already see that the transition of regular gasoline, diesel-operated ships are slowly transition to the electrification. Same goes to the airplanes. Let's say the airplanes already in some countries are using for takeoffs and landing regular gasoline, well, kerosene, and then for the on-flying, they're actually using the electrical engines and motors, turbines. So we are already there in transition, but not here yet.
And keeping up the conversation with you, that is super interesting. Can you share some example of innovative tools where we can measure, our sustainability efforts related to technology?
Yeah, I mean, measurement is actually really, really important for us, so that we can actually, as a companies, that they are into this type of a sustainability and being, conscious of environment. Through the different type of tools, a lot of things that can be done through the AI, right? Implementation through the AI, that they can very fast and simultaneously, and while you're actually doing something, and it can be tracked in a real time. Then you do also, as yourself, you're an analytics person, so you know that you can always make the assessments of what was done through the company and kind of see if your company is, what is the actually reduction of your carbon footprint, right? How do you actually help to the sustainability? How you as a company progress towards that, so that you're not going to be just basically kind of greenwashed and slap yourself as a sustainable or a green energy company, and actually you're not. For example, I mean, just to place a couple of, let's say, solar panels on your operations or your company or your, let's say, manufacturing, and in the back end you have actually a diesel generator. Well, you're not sustainable, you're not green. And a lot of companies actually, unfortunately, does that, just so that they can gain some type of benefits through the government, I would say, incentives and the benefits, which actually it's also really big misleading of the consumers and the publicity.
Excellent. Let's talk about let's keep innovation, but with a different focus. Let's speak about circular economy and how does business models can come from a linear perspective to a circular perspective, my friend.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ronnie. And I think I can also tie it into what you just said, Sergey. Um, I think we need to start thinking in terms of systems, right, and processes as opposed to, um, independent single things or actions that we do or that companies do, either with good intentions or, you know, with the intention of greenwashing directly. So I'll share with you sort of an innovative idea, right? So you think about a company, a construction company, for example, right? Um, they happen to have inputs that have various negative consequences for the environment. A lot of mining is there to make the concrete, et cetera. And then there are also outputs that have some negative effects for the environment as well. And this isn't a knock on any construction companies. Obviously, we all need their services, right, and products. But just thinking big picture here. So imagine for a moment, and just bear with me as I engage in a quick thought experiment, I guess, and I'll be quick. But imagine a world where we shift from these sorts of materials, which have a variety of negative consequences for the environment, to the types of materials that don't, because they're perhaps more aligned with nature. So, for example, you'll find in forests and natural ecosystems, there is a fungal network called mycelium, which is naturally there. Scientists have actually discovered that this organic material called mycelium that is naturally occurring also can be not only cultivated, but farmed. And if farmed, it can be made into an input to produce building materials. And not only that, but building materials made of this organic substance that's renewable and farmable is also comparable to concrete in terms of its strength, its durability, its longevity, etc. However, it doesn't have some of those negative consequences that concrete does have. So imagine a world where construction companies are building with this sort of material instead of concrete. So you have a situation now where the input is sustainable, right, and the output is also sustainable. And then you also have a variety of other benefits that sort of stem from that, such as buildings made of this material can also serve as, ironically, natural habitats for birds and other things that will sort of gravitate towards that. And you can design around that so that the structures are actually not just doing no harm, but actually adding value back to the ecosystem, right? And that, that's a great thing. And then just a last quick note, in this, theoretical example, which is very possible, it also just happens that construction companies, in their process, they produce waste that comes from those processes. For example, there's a lot of wood waste, right? And it just so happens that wood waste is an input that can be used to grow this mycelium that also can be used to construct buildings. So you could end up with a situation where if you're a construction company, you could repurpose your own waste and channel that into your own profitability. I mean, that sounds like a good plan to me. Or even if you may not have the systems and processes to do that directly, why not sell that waste to some other economic participant that can do exactly that? And so now your waste isn't something that you're paying somebody to come and collect, but you're selling it and you're making money from your own waste. And so it's things like that, we have to think, systematically and systemically about it, and not just, about slapping labels on things, and also be a little bit selfish in a good way. How can we make
Totally.
money? Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I'm a big fan of biophilic design and biophilic design principles, so I love what you said. And something very related to what you just both said is collaboration. And how can collaboration between businesses, governments, and NGOs drive a more meaningful sustainability outcomes? There are any successful partnerships you can highlight? I'd like to answer this. Actually, I'm a big fan of the collaborative ecosystems and productive ecosystems. And when we speak about ecosystems, you refer initially to the forest, but also it's a way how you can create symbiotic relationships between different parties in a society. So the triple or the quadruple or the fifth helix, there's different ways the literature talks about this, but it's how can put together private sector, public sector, education, institutions, NGOs with a common agenda, and the common agenda is how we get through these challenges, and the only way is collaborating, making spaces for them to speak together. And I can set a little bit of an example to this. I'm from Costa Rica, and I'm also lead an organization that is a nonprofit, and I work in corporate finance, related to venture capital and startup support. And one of the experiences that I have in Costa Rica was leading a project that was the innovation district of San Jose, the capital of the city. And that's a project that is going on, and was a project that was originally, put in the table by the municipality of San Jose. But what they did is to set a public-private partnership way in order to look for a private partner for the implementation. And that's where they set a licitation, and our set of companies, we did a consortium in order to complete all the requirements of the licitation. And now we're trying to lead. It's not easy. I don't know if we're gonna be successful. There is a big possibility, maybe not. But we got a lot of challenges in implementing these ideas. It's very easy to read it in a book, but putting together these organizations and trying them to collaborate is not as easy as is speak in a conference. So that's maybe a failure experience that I have, but I think it's resourceful for the moment right now. And talking about challenges and risks, how we're gonna address that, and maybe you can tell me, Hendrik, how we can companies balance profitability with sustainability without resorting to greenwashing,
Yeah, that's a great question, Ronnie. I think that kind of ties back to my earlier illustration. I know you're in the nonprofit world, Ronnie, but I think companies, within the boundaries of within ethical boundaries, I think companies need to shift away from thinking about sustainability strictly in terms of charity, although there is, I believe, a place and an important place for that. But if we're talking about, sustainability making impacts at scale, I think, really channeling the profit motive in that is really what's going to drive meaningful change at scale. So I think companies want to come at this from a profit perspective, and not profit in terms of how can I slap on a label so that I can get a credit that is going to somehow add to the bottom line. No, how can I actually do something that is fundamentally sustainable? That is, if it's sustainable, then that means it's efficient, right? And if it's efficient, it's going to be a profit driver. So, how can we be more efficient as a company, and therefore be more sustainable? And then on the back end, we can tell that story, and when we get to that, we're telling that story from an authentic space, as opposed to simply, just a label to get some credit or something like that.
Excellent. Serge, what are some best practices for ensuring transparency and sustainability reporting and avoiding misleading claims?
Good question. But before I answer that one, I would like to kind of add on your collaboration stuff that you said. What I believe that this is one of the biggest issues when it comes to today's companies and in trying to compete each other to these green initiatives, right? Who is going to surface, who is going to be better, who is going to make more profit. So we are living capitalistic world, right? And we are all about the profits, right? But not necessarily has to be only driven by the profit. We need to kind of find a way to get together and put on the side of all that stuff, right? Even between the countries, right? We just need to find a way through all that collaboration and not competition to be able to achieve these whole goals for sustainability on a long term, right? That's I wanted to kind of add on that one, because I believe so that the biggest issue that we have and we're facing today is that competition between each other instead of actually collaboration, and that's why we have so much of failures, and we have also a lot of people that it's moving everything in a slow track, right? We could be way more sustainable today if we would be collaborating instead of competing to each other. To answer can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's a little bit about best practices for ensuring transparency.
Oh, yes. Well, being transparent, that's actually very important into this industry. Myself, for example, whenever I speak to my clients and customers, I'm very transparent of what we can actually deliver, what we can achieve. And even that I, for example, do not have potentially in a moment solution, I always say to the people, give me your problem and we will find a solution. We can find a solution together. But transparency, it can be achieved in many different ways, right? When you, for example, achieve some type of, let's say, goals through your innovation to your company, be transparent. Give it to the public and tell them honestly what you have, what you don't have. Don't just necessarily through the marketing tools or some type of media sources or social media or like bogus certifications that you're going to just slap those labels and call yourself, call a day, which that's not actually what it needs to be. So basically, it's deceiving of the publicity and the consumers. So what we have to do is basically give that, let's say, I would say freely, transparently, everything what you actually have as a company, and don't be afraid because you're not completely sustainable. You will achieve. People will potentially give you suggestions where you potentially fail or you do not have or you're missing something, right, in the whole concept of that one. Being secretive or being misleading, it will not achieve nothing on a long term.
Excellent. I'm going to speak to you about our common resistance and how companies can manage resistance to these kind of policies. And I really think that resistance is usual when you are not involved in whatever the company is doing strategically. And I really think that involving, all the stakeholders and aligning their interest in the implementation of any project in a company, including a sustainability project, is key in order to that implementation to be successful. So I think that the creation of different level committees or participants of different levels into the implementation of certain policies, and understanding that you have to not only put the marketing team together in order to make a publicity, but also the C-suits, the partners have to be aligned, also the employees, the middlemen, the front office, the back office. Everybody has to be involved in the implementation of things, and doesn't have to be imposed. It has to be something that is born organically within the organization. And when you have the ability to do that, everything goes easy and flows. Let's speak about the future. What emerging trends or innovation do you see shaping the future in the corporate sustainability?
That's for me, right?
Yeah. The
Well,
innovator.
future, yes. So the future, well, look, I mean, I'll give you an example. Not so long ago, maybe let's say about 10 years, I would say in the back, people started using the thermal energy storages, right? And it was basically pure thermal energy storage that you use a solar ray, right, that you can actually convert it to the thermal energy and store it for a bean, and then deploy it through the heat exchange where the turbines can actually work in that way and create the energy. Now the problem with that stuff, the efficiency of that was only 50%. So it was not sustainable. It was not good solution. Now 10 years down the line, somebody come up with it and it says, what about if we use a steam, right? You already have a heat element. All you have to do is just to add the water. And through the water and the steam, you have higher efficiency of the turbines. So now the efficiency is 95%. So that's already kind of a good example of sustainability and innovation, how actually we achieve something better. And I believe so we will achieve even more different things, in the future, specifically through the battery storage systems that right now, the new technology is coming up. I mean, nuclear energy is actually one also of the clean energies that actually needs to kind of be implemented. And I believe so that also today's our administration is actually talking about initiatives to kind of create small nuclear plants, because they are sustainable, they are green energy. However, it always raises, that nuclear, right? What if it happens something like with Chernobyl? It happens also here in the United States. Well, that was an old and outdated technology. Today we have all different things that they're coming and servicing up, and I believe so that through the collaboration and between the countries, right? Because not each country has their own resource of innovations or the raw materials, right? So we have to kind of work together, come together, bring that to the surface, and explore all these novelties, how we can actually implement them in a better way that actually can help to become sustainable, fully sustainable as a starting first of all from the smaller companies, bigger corporations, and then to expand to the higher population, and to even by yourself as your let's say household, right, in a home, that you can actually change certain things to help to reduce that footprint.
Excellent. Escalation. How can smaller companies or startups adopt innovative sustainability practices without the resources of very large corporations?
Wow, that's
Good one.
that's a good one. That's a tough one. I think it boils down to systems thinking. Every organization, every company has systems and processes. And if you can identify waste in those systems and processes, that's a perfect place to start, because whatever the scale of that waste is, if you eliminate it, you're gonna see not only that you're being more sustainable, but you're going to see potential cost savings, potential time savings. So there's going to be benefits to the organization, as well as direct benefits to the organization, as well as indirect benefits that come back around as a result of being more sustainable.
Excellent. There is something that I want to put here together, and it's about policy and regulation. What role should government policies and regulations play in encouraging and enforcing genuine corporate sustainability? In the very beginning, sustainability was something that was volunteer, was something that companies implemented just because they thought there was a good trend. Maybe that trend, after that, became part of a regulation or a policy or a law, depending on the case. And I really think that when you realize how to monetize your policy, is easier to implement it. So you have to be creative. climate change, for example, is not the first environmental problem that the world has right now. Maybe it's the third in importance, but it's the first one in the agenda. Why? Because we understand how to monetize it. There is an importance for the governments to decarbonize their economies because that brings growth at the same time. But in contraposition to that, that doesn't have put biodiversity problems. There are number one environmental problems in the world. Why? Because we haven't realized as a humanity how we can monetize biodiversity conservation. And when we unlock that knowledge, and innovation and collaboration is key to understand how we're going to do that, probably it's going to be in the political agenda. So I think that innovation and collaboration is key to understand what comes first and what comes second. But for sure, in the political agenda, what is profit and the corporate agenda, what is profitable is always first. That's why climate change is first right now. We're gonna give some space for some closing questions.
Ronnie, let me just add on that.
Of course.
Because I can tell you also from my own experience, just implementation, for example, of the EV charging stations to the properties today, it is so much of a red tape. We have so much of a big bureaucracy over here. You have to go through so many hoops before you're going to actually get something permitted that you actually implement it and put it, and it's beneficial for everybody in any way. Either way, the municipalities or the cities and the utility companies, everybody going to be beneficially, will eventually benefit out of it because they're going to collect the majority of the money either way. But however, even through all that stuff, there's still so many regulations and that red tape that we have to kind of go through before we're going to be able to do something. It is, the models, for example, here in the United States are a little bit different than the models that they are in Europe or let's say in Asia, because here we have 50 states, each state has their own rules. Then it comes down to the zip codes, it comes to the cities, it comes to the counties, it comes to the buildings, it comes to the utilities. Everybody has their own regulations that you have to comply with it. And I'll give you an example. Since California is one of the most leading state to adoption of the electrification, the fast track that you can actually do over there, it's about 8 months. But in some instances, for example, that I'm working right now on some project, they told me that DWP said that by the way, that's utility company in California, they said that I would need to call them back in 2 years just to confirm if they have availability of the power. So that's why I believe that the reason is to create that sustainable microgrids and different resources and solutions because of those old regulations. Sometimes actually, if you are in a microgrid and if you're on, let's say, a sustainable energy source, you bypass all that regulations and those bureaucracy. It's a shorter path. We need to have a reconstruction of certain regulations and kind of easier path to achieve all this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I totally agree with that. I think that these policy barriers are very important that doesn't allow the implementation. And I don't know if the politicians do it that way just because they want to stop it, But
it's exactly that's what you were saying, resilience. And what I face the most of the problem today with this sustainability, it's education of the people. People need to be literally educated. Why is this good for them? And in which way actually is going to be beneficial to impact their lives. And even when I talk, for example, to my clients and customers, right, it's not potentially that I'm going to go right away over there with a sales pitch. I want to educate the people and explain them why is that actually good. And then you, as a client, as a customer, decide on your own, do you want it or you don't want it? And it's going to go very, very fast and but through the regulators and legislators and politicians, there is a big resilience because it's also division. Some people believe, some people do not believe, so it's very difficult to kind of get everybody on board.
Totally. Before going to some audience questions, let's close with you, Henry, and a little piece of advice that you can give to corporate leaders who want to move beyond greenwashing and embrace true sustainability.
Yeah, great question, Wani. I guess I would echo a previous point, which is that I would advise corporate leaders to have somewhat of a mindset shift, a paradigm shift, a thinking shift on this topic. And while there is a place for, I guess, charitable efforts, I think, C-suite leaders should think of this issue of sustainability as more in the domain of strategy and as a profit center or a profit driver, and thinking about, and then starting from the design space, not from the end product space. Don't start with the systems and processes that are sort of already there, but actually maybe backtrack and think about the origin, and find ways to extract waste out of your processes and systems, to drive efficiency, and that's going to drive profits. That's going to widen margins. And then on the back end of that, you can tell that story to customers and potential customers from an authentic space. Look at what we've actually done, to be more sustainable. Instead of trying to do the marketing on the front end, and the real sustainability efforts may not ever come. So that would be my primary suggestion.
Excellent. And now that you talk about customers, what's the role of customers in this space? How do you think customers could help?
Well, I mean, customers, not necessarily they can be driven by a certain, let's say, agenda. They're going to help us, right? In general, everything in our world that is going on around us, it's driven by the customer's demand.
Yeah.
It's not by the regulations, it's not by the governments, it's nothing by the whatever you're going to invent and you're going to put it out there that the customers want to just buy it right away. It's actually the customer what they want. So it's in a certain way they actually help that way just because of they are asking for that stuff. They're asking for the change. And now we can see the new generation, let's say, of today's kids, right? I mean, I have three of my own, so I can kind of relate because they're already 19, 17, so they're already driving, right? And you can see just from the driving aspect, for example, that they first of all didn't know how to drive stick shift, right? I grew up on a stick shift. And now even they start learning how to do the backing or parallel driving. They're depending on the technology in the vehicles.
Yeah.
So all that stuff it's kind of demand in the future that today, for example, I recently spoke with one 16-year-old kid and I asked him which you would like to drive. Do you want a Tesla car or electric car, for example, or you want a muscle car from 70s or 60s? Well, they want a technology. They're moving away from that. Yeah, they understand the value of those vehicles, right? But they want something new. They want some novelties. So the customers, and I believe so that's the impact of them is going to be their demand, what they want.
Excellent. I'm gonna speak to you a little bit about some final thoughts and what is an actionable step for the companies that want to implement sustainability. And I want to go back a little bit into history, maybe 50 years, and remember some key terms that is going to close with an understanding. We began speaking about sustainability maybe in the late 80s, early 90s, recently with the Kyoto Protocol. We began speaking in Rio 92 about sustainability, as a global agenda. And maybe we change or we shift the word into resilience back in 2010, I don't know, well. And now the word that we are using is regenerative approach. So it's super interesting because I'm a very rebel guy. I have a lot of tattoos in my body. Maybe you can see it right now, but I think that the most rebel thing you can do right now is get consciousness about the system that is not working, And now we can see trends in regenerative agriculture, for example, in regenerative economy. So these crypto bros, what they're doing, how this blockchain thing is emerging from a parallel system, that is controlled by a centric approach to a decentralized approach. And regenerative medicine, how we cannot, or how we know that I'm 40 and I know that I don't have a pension. Probably when I'm gonna be 80, I won't have a health system that works. So I have to use my own resources to solve those things. And regenerative approach is the approach that we are using in order to be independent from systems. And I think that how can your company be regenerative? Can your business model can align to regeneration? Because otherwise, the planet is not gonna have resources for us, and probably is gonna eliminate us. The planet doesn't have the problem. The problem is on humanity, and if we want to be in this planet for maybe 1,000 years more, we need to change our behavior. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm gonna give you space if you wanna have some questions for any one of us. This is the moment. Can go to the mic here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm pretty low. I heard a lot of fantastic things about sustainability, and I know several companies and governments are building it into that model, whether they like it or not, right? Positive or negative. I'm just curious, in terms of greenwashing, because that is the biggest thing that's pushing back on sustainability, because everybody does a claim, you're claiming something that's not possible. For startups especially, I know there was some discussion between on the startups, but I'm just curious as to, there are two ways of doing startup. One, a startup that provides a product or service, they want to keep it in that startup mode because it's more profitable in that low, operational mode, but then there are other startups which want to grow and become a big company. Irrespective of what they decide to, what is the best time for them to be putting some resources on sustainability to prevent it from looking like it's greenwashing? And because all the investors and stakeholders want that.
Yeah, I think that sustainability has to be a strategic decision, not a marketing decision. And when you put this as a strategic decision, it's part of your DNA as a company, no matter if you're little or you're big. Because at the end, you're gonna understand that efficiency is cheaper. And no matter what size of company you are, that's the way. And I really think that if you think strategically about sustainability, you're gonna understand that in the short term and in the long term, it's a good play.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think sometimes when I say we, I mean everybody, all of us. Sometimes we get caught up on labels. Sustainability is a label. It's an important label, but it's a label. And I think really what it boils down to, though, is efficiency. And I think all businesses want to be efficient because that has a direct correlation to your ability to make a profit. And so if you're a small startup who wants to stay small, or small startup who wants to grow big company, doesn't really matter. I'm sure you want to be efficient, So how can we be more efficient, I think should be a question that's being asked within that startup. And then on the back end, a separate question is, how can we tell the story of how efficient we've been?
I mean, from my end, from my perspective, right? Since I'm already in a let's say in a green energy sector, right? I've been for almost a decade, and I'm a small startup, as you mentioned. So, and of course, looking to become and growing to become bigger company, but I do everything in a slow pace. The problem that I see in mistakes from, let's say, that I experienced from the previous companies I work with, that everybody wants to do it like on a fast pace. Fast pace requires a lot of money. When you do then a lot of money, then you have a big overhead burn. And if you do not find yourself in a position that you want to be, well, in the past, let's put it just this way. In the past, let's say, I don't know if you know the statistic, but 23 and 24, 150 solar companies got closed in the United States. Why? Well, it was something that was going on with the loan in Federal Reserves when they increased that 0.5% of an interest rate, which basically really destroyed their financial path to that. So in a certain way, you just need to kind of slow pace yourself, see in which the direction actually this it's developing, and not just go to those online, let's say, certifications that you can kind of just slap the label on it on yourself and then put yourself in a trouble. I'll give you an example. We were just kind of, Henrik and I were like checking it out about the greenwashing companies, for example, like IKEA or Kering, right? They're saying that their coffee pods are recyclable, which they're not. Or let's say Hefty plastic bags, right? That they say they're coming from the recyclable resources, which again, they were not. So that's all kind of just misleading, and that's what we are talking about, the transparency. It's very important, right? Not to put yourself into the situation where you can actually, the government can go up behind, after you, or you're going to find yourself in some ridiculous lawsuits because you make that kind of like label on you and then jeopardize your actual success of your company.
It's a great question.
Thank you. Any other question? So thank you very much for your attention. We'll be around.
Thank you.